Greetings and welcome to a new faction guide, this time again with a double event. A few days before, CA released the latest DLC for Total War Warhammer, the Prophet and the Warlock. With this DLC we got finally all Regiment of Renown units, new lords and units for the Lizardmen and the Skaven. This means every of the 15 factions in the game has now his Regiment of Renown units, or you can say every faction is now complete. So I decided to do a double event. I'm going to release two faction guides in the row, the Lizardmen and the Skaven. We're going to start with the Skaven, and after that we're going to take a closer look on the Lizardmen. So we're going to start as always with the strength and the weaknesses of the Skaven. After that we take a complete look or a closer look on the complete army roster, and then I'm going to show you some competitive builds, and in the end we do a summary. So enjoy this stuff over here. Give me a thumb up, give me a like, give me a comment, give me a sub, whatever. And yeah, nothing more to talk about. Let's start with the strengths and weaknesses, and yeah, let's go. So let's talk about the strength and the weaknesses, and let's start with the strength of the Skaven over here. And in my opinion is the most significant point that the Skaven are able to bring large numbers to the battlefield, massive unit power in numbers. You can say they are probably the race that is able to bring the highest amount of units with one single army to the battlefield, because the units are very cheap. And this is a huge advantage and the most significant point in my opinion, because they have really a massive strength in overwhelming their enemies. So they are really good in doing stuff like that. So in most cases you're probably going to face up against a lot of Skaven units, because as I said, the units are average quite cheap and you are really able to bring a lot of units to the battlefield. The next point is nearly equally important. It is the massive shooting power. The Skaven are, after the latest DLC with the Prophet and the Warlock, probably the faction with the most or the best shooting power in the complete game. I would probably say they are even outrange or even outpower the Vampire Coast. They have now really strong Missile Infantry units. We had already still very good artillery units. We have the Warp Lightning Cannon, the Plague Car Catapult, really strong. Really strong stuff over here, but now we have in addition also very strong Missile Infantry units. So I would probably say that the Skaven are the faction with the best ranged firepower in the complete game, you can say. I'm pretty sure about that, and this is of course a very strong point. Of course the output or the performance output always varies quite heavily on the terrain. If you are on a very straight terrain, you have probably good options to place your artillery and stuff. If you fight in a very uneven terrain, the performance is not so good. So it depends a little bit. This is the disadvantage, but overall the massive firepower is one of the most significant points over here. The next point is also really important and a very strong advantage. We are not only able to bring large numbers of units to the battlefield, we are also able to choose in a very good variety out of different units. So we have a very good selection out of different units on the roster. Every arm of service, or nearly every arm of service, is quite well stacked. This is always good because you have a very good variety out of different builds and tactics available, and this naturally causing some trouble for your opponent to counter build this, because he never knows what you are going to do on the battlefield. Maybe you you bring a massive harass build, or you do a massive infantry heavy build, or you bring a lot of artillery. So you have a lot of options, and it's very difficult for your opponent to guess what you are going to do in the game over here, and so it's very difficult for him to create his own build. The last point worth to be mentioned is, in my opinion, that we have quite good harass units available. They are not the best harass units in the game because we have no cavalry and stuff, but we have still some good units, harass units over here available, and this is in many tactics a quite significant point and worth to be mentioned. But where's light, there is shadow, so let's talk about the cons. The most significant point over here is definitely that everything is quite low tier. We are able to bring large numbers to the battlefield, but individually considered, everything has a quite low tier character. We have a very, in most cases on average, a very bad amount of armor. Their units are not really heavily armored, they are quite low on armor. They have also not the best melee stats. The leadership is very, very bad. We have a very low amount of leadership in average, and this means also, as I explained also in my Greenskin faction guide, that everything will start to rout very easy, everything will start to break up very fast. And this is of course a disadvantage. In fact, the Skaven have on average a lower leadership than the Greenskins, and as I explained in my Greenskin faction guide, this means it is very difficult to control. So it's not a good faction for beginners. It's very hard to control. In fact, you need a lot of micromanagement, and you have to use the strength of the large numbers to overwhelm your enemy, or of harass units or artillery. You cannot win the game just with infantry power or just with your unit strength, because the units are on average not really strong, and this is of course the biggest disadvantage over here, the most significant point. Another significant point is definitely that we have a very bad access to different magical laws. In fact, we have no magical laws besides the Skaven spells of ruin or the Skaven spells of plague. So these two magical laws are in fact quite good. They are quite good magical laws, but as I said, besides from that, we have no different other magical laws available, and this is of course in some cases a disadvantage. Another quite interesting point and worth to be mentioned is the fact that we have no flying units, and this means of course also here a bad mobility, never the aerial threat. Flying units have some advantages, and in this case we have not one single flying unit available, and in some cases this can be a disadvantage of course. Next point, or another point, is that we have no cavalry. There's not one single cavalry unit. And also here cavalry units have some advantages, in many cases very good. Skaven have no access to cavalry, and this can be in some cases also here a disadvantage of course. Summing together, you can say the Skaven have not the best mobility. We have just ground units, and the ground units we have some ground units with a good amount of speed with Skaven slave slingers and stuff, but they are not the fastest. So I would definitely say there are some units that have some good mobility or amount of mobility, maybe the Doom Wheeler and stuff, but in fact nothing is really high speed, and that means we have a very I would definitely say a very bad amount of mobility. So this is of course a huge disadvantage. But besides from that, I found nothing else. I would say a small disadvantage is of course a small hero selection, but it's not really significant. Regarding the lords, I would definitely not say it's the best roster, but I would also not say it's a bad roster. It's quite okay, so nothing to talk about over here. We have a quite low amount of monsters. We have just the Hellpit Abomination and the Red Ogres, but also not significant. These two perform in some cases really good, or especially the Red Ogres are performing in many cases good, and in some cases the helped abomination, so it's not a big deal. But besides from that, I found nothing else. So let's continue with the unit selection of the unit roster, and let's start with the lords. So let's begin with the cheapest lord on the roster, the warlord. On foot he has a weapon strength of 400, this is quite low. The amount of AP damage is 120, is also very low. He is I wouldn't say a melee expert, but he's designed to fight in melee combat. The melee stats therefore are quite good. We have a melee attack of 50, a melee defense of 55. For a Skaven unit he is quite heavily armored with an amount of 90. He has a bronze shield, but the best use is of course on his mount, a red ogre called Bonebreaker. On Bonebreaker the stats will increase dramatically, so we have a much higher amount of hit points. The weapon strength will increase by 60, so we have 460 overall, and the amount of AP damage will increase dramatically, so we have then on Bonebreaker an amount of AP damage of 322, and this is a lot of stuff in fact. The speed will increase a little bit, but besides from that no changes. One disadvantage over here on Bonebreaker, he has the armor will decrease by 20, but doesn't matter. The best use is of course on his mount. On foot however I would never pick him, always pick him on his mount Bonebreaker. He has some mediocre abilities or quite low tier abilities, Rally and Deadly Onslaught, but we have Verminous Valor that will cause an explosion, and all infantry units around, enemy infantry units will fly away, and so he's not stuck then and he can escape. The speed will also increase by 24% and the leadership by 8%. This is a quite good ability. Then we have Shield of Distraction. All enemies in a range of 30 meters will get a decrease of the melee attack by 5. This is also quite good, and in some cases World's Edge armor that will increase the amount of armor by 60 for 57 seconds. This is in some cases quite useful. In summary, this is a quite good option if you want to pick a cheap lord. He is a quite strong lord on Bonebreaker. He's very cost efficient. The extra charge for Bonebreaker is just 500, so the price, it depends how many abilities you will enable, but it's about 1400 credits, and this is really decent on Bonebreaker. He's really designed to fight in enemy infantry ranks, causing a tremendous amount of damage then, and also against enemy large entities. Even if he has no large anti-large bonus, the performance against other monsters and stuff like that is in some cases also really good. So for 1400 credits on Bonebreaker, he's really worth the price, really. Worth to be mentioned is that the warlord has a missile resistance of 15%. So let's come to Kretch Craventail. And he's also quite cheap lord, but he's a legendary lord. He came with the DLC, I might remember myself, it was with the Queen and the Crown, as a FLC lord, and he's declared as a melee expert. The price is about 1300 1200 credits. It depends how many spells you are going to enable. The weapon strength is quite low. We have just 400. The amount of AP damage is 120, also very low. The bonus, we have a small bonus versus large of 25, but not significant, I would say. The melee defense is dramatically high. You can say we have 70. This is very, very good, but therefore the melee attack is just 40. This is not really good for a legendary lord, but he has a quite good amount of armor with 90. He has a charge defense against large foes, what is quite nice. He has a missile resistance of 15%, and he has some good abilities like Treacherous Raiders that will increase the weapon damage by 10%, the melee attack by 9%, and the amount of AP damage by 10%. He has also Verminous Valor that will, as I already explained with the Warlord, that will cause an explosion. Stand or die, nothing special. Stay here. I will get help. This is a quite unique ability over here. Dredge receives stalk and unspottable with this ability, and plus 16% leadership, but in my opinion not really important. Lucky Skullhelm is another ability that will constantly increase the damage resistance by 33% and the speed by 24%. Also quite nice. But summing all together, he has no mount. The price is very cheap. He has really good abilities, but the weapon strength is very low. He's a small target on foot with a very low mass. He will fly around. He can never compete against a Kolik and stuff like that, even if he has a small anti-large bonus. So it's not really worth to pick him, even if it is cheap. I would prefer the Warlord on the Bonebreaker. He's much more steady. He has much more AP damage. Dredge has nearly no AP damage, and for this case, in my opinion, not a competitive pick. It's quite nice to get him as a free Lord with the Queen and the Crown DLC. This was a nice idea, but besides from that, for competitive gameplay, I would never pick him. Worth to be mentioned, or not sure if it is worth, but I'm going to mention it. He's able to get deployed in a Vanguard position. This is quite unique for a Lord, but besides from that, nothing special. So let's continue. The next Lord is Quick Headtaker. He has a weapon strength of 420, also not the best. The amount of AP damage is very high, therefore we have an amount of 340. This is very good, and we have a bonus versus infantry of 35. This is also quite significant amount for a bonus. The melee defense is 42. It's okay, quite low in fact, but therefore we have a very high melee attack of 63. This is really good. He's very heavily armored with an amount of 110. This is a lot of stuff, and he has a missile resistance of 15%. Let's take a short look on the abilities. We have Verminous Valor and Stand Your Ground. Quite interesting is over here Trophy Heads. That will reduce the melee defense by 45 and the melee attack by 26 of an enemy lord or a hero. Quite interesting ability. Then let's go to the items. We have here Warp Short Armor. This is very important. This is constantly in a range of 40 meters. It will reduce the melee defense by 5 and the amount of armor by 18. Very interesting. Then we have Dwarf Gorgor. That will increase the amount of AP damage of Queek by 40% and the amount of melee attack by 26 for 33 seconds. The price is a little bit higher, 100 credits about. But also here, Queek is a very popular character in the Warhammer universe. I know this, but for competitive gameplay, I would definitely say the performance is not good enough. The really good points over here are the high amount of AP damage and the bonus versus infantry and the melee attack, and of course the high amount of armor. So on paper the stats are not bad, it's quite good, but in fact the performance is not the best. I miss a little bit on Quick Headtaker. The anti-large bonus, anti-infantry bonus is nice, but the amount of splash damage is overall not so significant, so it doesn't really matter in my opinion. If he is going to fight in a group of infantry, it's not that efficient, so I miss the anti-large bonus. So many of you probably don't want to hear this, but in summary, I would definitely say I would prefer the Warlord on Bonebreaker before Quick Headtaker, because he's much more steady and efficient, but that's my personal opinion. The next Lord on the list is the Grey Seer with the Law of Plague. You can deploy him on foot or on his mount, a Screaming Bell, this massive unholy battle altar. On this battle altar, on the Screaming Bell, he is much better in melee combat and very dangerous for enemy low tier infantry units. The weapon strength, however, will decrease on the Screaming Bell. We have just a weapon strength of 200, but therefore we have a amount of a bonus versus infantry of 20. The amount of AP damage is 140 and the weapon strength overall is 200 on the Screaming Bell. We have he's quite heavily armored on the Screaming Bell. This is a quite positive point over here, but of course the extra charge for the Screaming Bell is 800 and you are a massive target then for enemy artillery and stuff like that. Of course always be careful with that. But in most cases, I would definitely say the Grey Seer is the best use is on the Screaming Bell, and the extra charge is worth the price over here. The price depends about 1,800 credits. It depends how many spells and abilities you are going to enable. The Grey Seer is able to cast spells from the Law of Plague. And we have some good spells over here. We have, for example, the dreaded 13th spell that will cast or summon a group of Stormworm, very, very interesting over here, very good spell. In fact, we have Vermintide that will summon a group of clan rats, always good tactical spell, always can interrupt your enemy or cast the spell in the backline on enemy archers and stuff. This is very, very good. And we have Plague, a quite good spell, causing a quite mediocre amount of damage. It's declared as a Vortex spell, but it stays always on the same point for 20 seconds, and you don't need too much winds of magic, so quite interesting. So in some cases you can bring a Grey Seer with the Law of Plague, but I would prefer in this case to get a melee combat lord and to pick later the Plague Priest maybe from the heroes, but it depends. In some cases it's also worth to bring a Grey Seer directly to the battlefield with the Law of Plague. Worth to be mentioned is that the Grey Seer has on his Screaming Bell a missile resistance of 25%, what is really good, and a magic resistance of 25%, and he's causing fear on the Screaming Bell. As I said, you can also deploy him on foot. The price is much cheaper than about 1,300 credits, so in some cases also an option, of course. The next lord on the list is the Grey Seer with the Law of Ruin. This is the same unit like the Grey Seer with the Law of Plague. So if we take a look on the stats, there's no difference over here. The price is also nearly the same. He's also able to sit on a Screaming Bell. As I said, the only difference over here is that the Grey Seer over here is able to cast spells from the Law of Ruin, not from the Law of Plague, but we have the same spell with the dreaded 13th spell over here that will cast a group of Stormworm, and this is always quite nice. We have Warp Lightning, in my opinion a quite good spell, because you only need 5 winds of magic. This is not really much. The damage output is also not gigantic, but a constant damage spell, bombardment spell for 5 winds of magic is always good. We have Howling Warp Gale that will stuck your enemy for 14 seconds, but in my opinion not so important. Death Frenzy is quite nice. That will increase the melee attack by 26 and the weapon damage by 25%, and the unit is then immune to psychology. Then we have Scorch, breath spell, but in my opinion not worth to be picked, and Crack's Call that will increase a quite good amount of damage, but the winds of the costs are also quite hefty. You need 15 winds of magic and 200 credits extra charge, so in most cases I wouldn't spend the extra charge. In summary, I would definitely say the Law of Plague is the better lore. I wouldn't pick the Law of Ruin, even if it is declared in this game as the better lore, because you can see the Law of Ruin is always much more price intense. But I would always prefer the Law of Plague, especially because Plague and Vermintide. But besides from that, nothing more to talk about. If you prefer the Law of Ruin, pick the Grey Seer with the Law of Ruin for nearly the same price like the Grey Seer with the Law of Plague. We have also the same resistance of 25% missile resistance and 25% magic resistance on the Screaming Bell, but you can also pick him on foot for a much cheaper price, of course. The next lord on the list is Lord Skrolk. He is not able to get mounted or sit on a mount. The price is about 1,800, 1,700 credits. It depends how many spells and abilities you're going to enable. He has some good stuff over here. If we take a look on the melee stats, he's definitely not designed to fight in melee combat, same with the Grey Seer, but we have a melee attack of 55, what is not bad. The melee defense of 45 is also not bad, and the weapon strength of 400 is also not bad. So if we compare the stats or the weapon strength of 400 to the stats of the Grey Seer, for example, the Grey Seer has just 310. So in some cases you can send him also in melee combat. The amount of AP damage is complete garbage, amount of armor is garbage, so this, you can forget this completely. But we have 2 abilities with the melee attack. He's causing magical attacks with his melee attack, and he has an ability called Contaminated. For 10 seconds the leadership of your opponent will drop by 10. He has some mediocre abilities, nothing special. Aura of Pestilence is quite nice. That will reduce the melee attack by 5 of your opponents around constantly. Then he is able to cast spells from the Lore of Plague. For example, we have also here Plague or Vermintide, so all this good stuff. So in some cases it's definitely worth to bring Lord Skrolg, but the disadvantage is of course that he's still not a melee expert, even if the melee stats are a bit increased regarding the Grey Seer. Lord Skrolg causing fear constantly on foot. This is also quite interesting, and he has a missile resistance of 15%. He has a quite good items, the Liber Bobanicus, that will cause damage to combatants around. This is quite nice. Direct damage for 15 seconds. And Rod of Corruption, that will cause also damage to combatants for 11 seconds around him. So this is quite good damage spells over here, or damage items, you can say, direct damage items. So this is quite nice. But besides from that, nothing more. It is, in my opinion, quite difficult to answer if Lord Skrolg is a competitive pick. I would definitely say in many cases we have some really good advantages over here. Lord Skrolg is a mighty spellcaster, especially because he's able to cast spells from the Lore of Plague. He has some really good damage items over there, and he's also in emergency cases really able to go in melee combat against other infantry units and stuff. So these are really good points. The disadvantages are that he's quite pricey, he's quite squishy, and if you are able to bring a large target to the battlefield, in many cases maybe a Grey Seer with a Screaming Bell is more competitive. But as I said, in many cases Lord Skrolg is really worth to bring to the battlefield. So let's come to one of the newest lords, or the lords that came with the latest DLC, the Prophet and the Warlock. In this case we're going to take a look on the Warlock Master. The Warlock Master is a non-legendary lord, and he is quite similar to the Warlock Engineer, you can say. He will support your artillery units or ranged units. He has an ability called Extra Powder. Most of you might know this. This is a constant ability that will increase the explosion damage by 10% and the amount of AP explosion damage by 10%. This is quite interesting. He has an ability called Mask of Fear that will decrease the leadership and the melee attack of enemy units nearby, also constantly. Besides from that, Arcane Conduit, but we have a new quite good ability, Brass Orb. This is a vortex spell, but a quite steady vortex spell, so he not moving all around the battlefield. He stays quite well on one spot, so this is quite nice. Over here the damage output is also quite nice. You can activate this 3 times and it will last 90 seconds. So I can definitely say the cooldown is 90 seconds. It will just last for 13 seconds, sorry, but it is a quite nice spell, and I would always enable it if I would pick the Warlock. The spells are the same spells like from the Lore of Ruin. He is able to cast spells from the Lore of Ruin. Besides from one spell, he has a spell called Skitterleap. This will target an ally or own unit. The target is hidden. It's effective when you like to flank, for example, or do a sneak attack. The speed will increase by 24%. He has Stalk then and is unspottable. So this is the only difference. Besides from that, the spells are the same, like from the Lore of Ruin, for example, Warp Lightning. You can sit him on a Doomflyer. This is quite interesting. So this new smaller unit, or similar to the Doom Wheel, but it's a smaller version. You can sit him for 450 credits on a Doomflyer. The hit points will increase a lot, but of course the melee stats will decrease, and also the weapon strength. But therefore we have a massive charge bonus of 55%. This is a chariot, so the best use is of course constantly drive through enemy infantry ranks, pull them out, drive again in the enemy infantry ranks. Is the best use for that. And you can set him also on a doom wheel for 750 credits. Same here, the stats will increase, from his hit points will increase, the weapon strength will increase, the charge bonus will increase, so we have a charge bonus of 60 over there. So in some cases it's a really quite nice combination over here with the Doom Wheel or the Doom Flyer. It is quite micromanagement intense in my opinion, so if you want to do a little bit damage, you have to constantly drive around and drive in enemy infantry ranks, and also you would like to cut stuff, so this is not so easy to control. But even though I think, for example, the Doom Flyer for 450 credits is worth the price, and even if you would like to get a Doom Wheel for 750 credits extra charge, this is quite nice. The Warlock Master is then quite cost intense. The price is about 2,500 credits. It depends how many spells you are going to enable, or 2,200 credits, but he sits then on a Doom Wheel. A problem is, in my opinion, that the Warlock Master is designed to support artillery or missile infantry, so in the most cases you are going to stay on one spot to that your own units will get this explosion buff and stuff like that. So it's counterproductive to set him on a Doom Wheel and drive around. This is just what I think, but it's still a quite interesting combination over here. He has a missile resistance of 15%, but besides from that, nothing more. He has a constant ability called Scurry Away that will give him constantly a buff of 12% speed if the leadership is high, whatever that means. So this is a quite nice character. This is a quite very new combination. It opens some possibilities for tactical gameplay or to get a cheaper Doom Wheel. So as I said, for 2,300 credits about, you get a Doom Wheel and a Lord, and a normal Doom Wheel is the price 1,450 credits extra charge. So in some cases it can really pay off, and quite nice. It's quite interesting. As I said, the only problem is, in my opinion, that you would like to stay on one spot if you would like to give your own units the buff for the artillery or for the explosion damage or IP explosion damage, and this is not so good if you drive around all the time with the Doom Wheel. Worth to be mentioned is that the Warlock Master always is causing magical attacks with his melee attack. So let's talk about Ikit Claw, the most expensive Lord on the roster and the newest one. He came with the Prophet and the Warlock, and he is a quite interesting Lord. We have a huge missile damage of 1,000. He has a ability with the missile damage called Burned that will decrease the leadership by 8 for 10 seconds. So a massive missile damage. The explosive base damage is 150, but therefore we have a very small explosive AP damage of 66. And the missile range is quite short. We have just 80, and this is a bit of disadvantage. So against unarmored targets, if he shoot from a very small in a very small range, or if he is very near to the target he would like to shoot, in some cases this can pay off. But he's also designed a little bit to fight in melee combat. He has not the best, he's a spellcaster, he has not the best melee stats, but he has a weapon strength of 370. This is not really good, but it's also not bad for a spellcaster. But he has an AP damage of 250, and this is quite nice for a spellcaster. The bonus versus large is 22. He is anti-large, but 22 is not really much, so I don't expect any wonders here. The melee attack is 45. This is okay for a spellcaster. The magic here he's causing magical attacks and flaming attacks, also quite nice. And he has a melee defense of 56, what is really, really good. His amount of armor is 110, so he's very heavily armored, so really, really nice. He has a missile resistance of 15%, what is also quite okay. So you can see he is a hybrid unit. You cannot really say that you don't expect any wonders in melee combat, but he has some quite nice stats. So he's definitely not bad, or not. This is definitely not junk. This is definitely quite okay for a spellcaster. And he has, in addition, also his ranged modus with a lot of missile damage against unarmored targets. He is able to cast spells from the Law of Ruin. He has also these abilities. One is Mask of Fear, quite nice ability, and Brass Hope I would always enable, is quite nice ability over here. And he has an ability called Unlimited Power that will greatly improve the power recharge rate and increase the power reserves. He has a very unique item called Storm Demon that will cause magical damage. This is also quite nice for 172 extra charge. In some cases it's worth to pick. You have 2 loads and the cooldown is 120 seconds. You can set him also on a Doomflyer and on a Doom Wheel. The result is nearly the same like on the Warlock Master. The hit points will increase dramatically, therefore the weapon strength and the melee stats will decrease, but he has then a quite high charge bonus. And of course he will lose his own ability to shoot on enemies with his missile, with his ranged ability. Then he will use the missile ranged ability from the Doom Wheel. On the Doomflyer, however, he has no shooting ability, so he's not able to shoot anymore. But nothing more to talk about. In some cases, a really interesting spell. I would definitely a really interesting lord. I would definitely say I would prefer Ikit Claw before the Warlock Master, because he is quite interesting. Also on foot, not only on a Doomflyer or Doom Wheel, also on foot he's a quite interesting lord. But I'm not sure. We have to wait how this will. How he will perform in the meta game. He's quite expensive though. He has a price about 1,900 credits. It's still okay. So but besides from that, nothing more to talk about. I would declare Ikit Claw as cost efficient, and I would definitely say he's worth to pick in many matchups. I made several tests or many tests, and I really can say that I really love the performance. Even if you don't have to expect any wonders, he is no Kolek, he is no Tyrion, and also not a new Tackless or stuff like that. But on his ability to sit on the Doom Wheel or Doomflyer, this is very interesting. I really like this over here. But also on foot with his missile damage or his capability to shoot. And even in melee combat, he's no melee expert, but even there he is quite okay. And then he's in addition a spellcaster, or this is his main purpose. So this is quite nice, and I really like this new lord over here. So let's come to the heroes and let's talk about the assassin. And the assassin is a quite underrated hero in my opinion. He's quite cheap. You can deploy him for about 500 or 600 credits. It depends how many spells or items you're going to, or abilities, he has no spells, abilities and items you're going to enable. He's able to get deployed in the vanguard position. He has stalk, so he's always hidden. He's a duelist and he can dodge a lot of, so he has a dodge ability. That means he can dodge a lot of attacks or can refuse a lot of damage, stuff like that. And he's definitely designed to kill enemies single entity units, definitely not multiple entity units. Never send him in a group of monsters or stuff like that. Definitely single entity units, but it doesn't really matter if it is a large monster or if it is a lord, for example. But this is quite nice. So on the battlefield he's a very, very small target. Many players will ignore him. He has no ranged ability like the other version from the Dark Elves, the Canid Assassin, but he has a quite good damage output with 375. The amount of AP damage is 150, and he has a quite good melee attack with 60. The melee defense and the amount of armor is complete garbage. He's just designed to fight or to damage enemy units. He's not designed to defend himself. He has an ability called Concealment Bombs. He can cast this or he can activate this on his own. Of course, target he is hidden then, and he has stalk on is unspottable, but he has always stalk, so in the most cases I would disable this ability. It's not worth the price. He has an ability, what I really like is this ability called Assassin's Trophy, that will last 29 seconds. That will decrease the enemy melee defense by 27 and the enemy melee attack by 26. This is very useful if you're going to attack a lord or a hero, because he's very vulnerable then. Then he has a ability called Slippery that will increase the melee defense and the speed, but I also would disable this over here. But we have another ability that I would always enable, Rival High Talisman, that will decrease the melee attack by 44 in a range of 40 meters around himself for 31 seconds. This is quite hefty, I would say, and this is the extra charge is just 70, so I would always enable this over here. And we have an ability called Skaven Brew that will increase the melee attack of 44 and his weapon damage of 25%. Therefore, the armor will decrease by minus 30. Don't know what this means, because his armor is 20, so then he has minus 10 or something like that, but doesn't matter. And he is immune to psychology then. He has a physical resistance of 30%. This is a very interesting point over here, because as I already said, the melee defense is garbage, the amount of armor is complete garbage, but the physical resistance is always good, so he can also get a lot of damage. And the physical resistance, if it is non-magical damage, the physical resistance will do a great job over here. But besides from that, nothing more to talk about. In many cases, I would definitely say he's worth to pick. He's definitely cost efficient, worth the salt. He is a very good option to kill enemy lords, heroes, single entity units, monsters. And for this case, he's a small target. Many players will ignore him the most time, and it's not so easy to kill very fast. And for this case, I would definitely say he's worth to bring to the battlefield. So let's come to the Warlock Engineer, and he is a quite similar unit to like the Master Engineer from Darwin or the Warlock Master. He is a support unit for your ranged units. He has the same ability like the Warlock Master, extra powder over here. He has Mask of Fear, like I explained before. And he has a magic missile damage ability called Doom Rocket, but it is not really efficient, so I would leave it out. He has two quite nice items, Shadow Magnet Trinket that will increase the missile parry by 12 constantly, and Warpstone Armor that will cause constant damage to combatants around 30 meters. This is quite nice. He is a spellcaster, so he is able to cast spells from the Lord of Ruin. Nothing more to talk about, but besides from that, he has not a own ability or own ranged attacks. So for example, the Warlock, the Master Engineer from Darwin has a gun, so he can shoot around, but the Warlock Engineer has nothing like that. So he has just his melee stats, and his melee stats are complete garbage. He has a very low amount of armor, a very low amount of melee attack, and melee defense complete garbage. Weapon strength is also very bad, and at least the amount of AP damage is quite nice with nearly 200, and he has a missile resistance of 15%, but never send him in melee combat and stuff like that. This is forget this completely. Even for a spellcaster, this is quite bad. So for 1500 or 1200 credits, it depends how many spells and abilities you enable, I would never bring him. The ranged units of the Skaven are good enough. They really don't need a Warlock Engineer or support unit for that. And the Warlock Engineer is, the only good thing is that he is a spellcaster, but he has no mount, for example, so he's always on foot. He's a very easy to kill. He's a melee combat complete garbage, so I would leave him out. I would say it's never a competitive pick and never worth to bring to the battlefield. Spend your money at some other unit. So last but not least, we have the Plague Priest, and the Plague Priest is a caster which is able to cast spells from the Law of Plague. This is quite nice. As I said, I prefer the Law of Plague before the Law of Ruin. We have Pestilence Birth over here, we have Plague over here, we have for example Vermintides, and all these good spells. We have So mediocre items, nothing special. Also the abilities are nothing. Plague Rush, you can disable this in my opinion. He's able to sit on a Plague Furnace. This is a quite similar mount like the Screaming Bell. The extra charge is also 800 credits, and the stats will, the hit points will increase dramatically. Also the amount of armor. So in most cases it's worth to bring him on a Plague Furnace, of course. And if you need an additional spellcaster, the Plague Priest is definitely worth to bring to the battlefield, especially if you are able to bring a large, bring him on his mount. He's a large target then, but if it is possible, he's really pay off, and the price is about 1,800 or 2,000 credits, but this is a quite nice combination and worth to be brought to the battlefield if it is necessary. He causing magical attacks and has the ability, or the melee attack ability called Contaminated, that will reduce the leadership by 10 for 10 seconds. But besides from that, nothing more to talk about. On these Plague Furnace, he's an anti-infantry monster, you can say, and can cause a lot of trouble in the front line, and with Vermintide and stuff you can constantly cast clan rats in the back line, and this is always with Vermintide is always a quite nice ability, and Plague, as I already said. So a quite good hero over here, nothing more to talk about. So let's talk about the infantry, and let's begin with the cheapest unit, the Skaven Slaves. These guys are a meat shield. They count as expendable. That means if these guys rout off, other units are not affected by a leadership drop. And overall the stats are really garbage, complete garbage. I mean, we have the amount of 12 melee attack, amount of 12 melee defense, the weapon strength is 18, the amount of AP damage is 4, they have no armor literally, so the amount of armor is 0. And yeah, nothing more to talk about. The price is just 125, but in any case the Skaven Slave with spears are preferable, because the damage output of the normal Skaven Slaves is complete garbage. Same with the peasant mob from Bretonia. In any case, if you would like to bring a cheap unit, or to increase, or you would like to increase your amount of units in your army, you would like to get a unit that is still a little bit able to hold the line for some time, and for this reason never pick a group of peasant mob from Bretonia or a group of Skaven Slaves. They will rout almost immediately, they will do nearly no damage, and your front line will collapse almost immediately. So even the 125 credits are too much for this kind of unit over here. Same with the peasant mob from Bretonia. They literally doing nothing, and this is the problem over here. Always prefer the Skaven Slave spears before the Skaven Slaves, because these guys are able to hold the line for some time and they are much more steady. So then let's continue directly with the Skaven Slave spears. These guys are quite decent. The extra charge regarding the normal Skaven Slaves is just 25. These guys are anti-large, so they have a small anti-large bonus of 6, what is quite nice for that price. The other stats are quite similar. The melee defense is a bit increased. We have a melee defense of 16 regarding the normal Skaven Slaves, but this is quite good. So these guys are at least anti-large, are at least able to hold the line for some time, and to increase the amount of units in your army, the Skaven Slaves are really perfect for that. So in any case, even if you're down facing up against large entities, it doesn't matter. The Skaven Slaves are quite able to hold the line for some time, even against some infantry units. So this is a quite decent unit and really cost efficient. Worth to be mentioned is that both units, the Skaven Slave and the Skaven Slaves with spears, have an ability called Strength in Numbers. So if their hit points will drop under 50%, they will get a leadership buff by 6 and a buff of the melee defense by 8. Therefore the speed will decrease, but even though in the most cases with a leadership of 35 they will rout off very fast, so it don't you will never get in the situation, or in the most cases, where the Skaven slaves will drop under 15% of their hit points. In the most cases, they will be gone before the leadership is dropping under 50%. Also worth to be mentioned that all Skaven slave and clan rats units have another ability called Scurry Away that will increase the speed by 12% constantly if the leadership is high. So let's come to the clan rats, and the clan rats are quite, the price is nearly the double, but we have also much increased stats regarding the Skaven slaves. We have a quite much higher amount of hit points, plus 720, overall 7,200. We have a much higher amount of melee attack, 24 overall. The melee defense is now 18. The weapon strength is 26, what is quite okay for a low tier, a very cheap unit like the clan rats. They count also as a meat shield because they are still a very cheap and unit with a quite low performance. But even though for 300 credits, I would say you get a bit for your money, and in some cases you can bring these clan rats, even if I would prefer a very, very, very cheap frontline with Skaven slave spears, and would then go with mid-range stuff like plague monks and stuff like that. In the most cases, I wouldn't spend the 300 credits on the clan rats, but it depends. So we have also clan rats with spears. These guys are anti-large and have a charge defense against large foes. Quite interesting is that the Skaven slave with spears have no charge defense. Remember that. If you put them in the front line, they will get the charge of large entities and stuff, so they have no charge defense. But the clan rats with spear have a charge defense, and they have a bonus versus large of 9. Their melee defense is increased by 6 regarding the normal clan rats, therefore we have a decreased melee attack. So in this case, I would also say that, the normal clan rats are preferable because you have at least some damage output. With the clan rats with spears, you spend 325 credits on a unit that have at least a bit of an anti-large bonus or has a charge defense, but still the performance is not really good. So in this case, I would prefer the normal clan rats because these guys have at least some damage output over here. The next unit are the clan rats with shields. So regarding the normal clan rats, these guys have an increased melee defense by 4. This is a quite interesting unit. The extra charge is 50 credits to the normal clan rats, and in my opinion worth to spend. As I already said, the clan rats with spears are, I would always prefer the normal clan rats, and if you pick the normal clan rats, pick them with shield, because you have then increased melee defense, and the 50 credits extra charge is worth the pick over here in my opinion. Then we have also a clan rat spear version with shields. These guys have a increased melee defense by 4. This is not significant over here. The price is 375 credits, so nearly 400 credits. Beside the increased melee defense, there are no changes. And as I already said, if you want to spend your money on clan rats, always prefer the normal clan rat version with shields, because these guys have at least a damage output, and the spear version is not so effective for the defense purposes. If you want to spend your money on a cheap anti-large unit, pick the normal Skaven slaves with spears, and from the clan rats, the normal clan rats with shields. So I would not spend the money on the clan rat spears with shields. This is not worth the price over here. So there's also a Regiment of Renown version of the clan rats with shields available, the clan Vulcan tail slashers, and these guys have a quite good, have much increased stats over here regarding the normal clan rats with shields. We have a melee attack of 29, we have a melee defense increased by 9, what is quite a lot, 31 overall, and a weapon strength also much increased by 8 regarding the normal clan rats with shields, 34 overall. These guys have burning swords, so that means they're causing flaming attacks, quite interesting, and they have a fire resistance of 70%. This is quite nice over here. They still count as a meat shield, but overall we have much increased stats. They have a bronze shield like the other clan red versions, so this is quite nice. The price is 500 credits. I would say this is quite decent and worth the pick in many cases, so I really like the unit over here. This is a quite good regiment of renown version, and as I said, the clan rats with shields are overall preferable to the clan rats with spears. Overall is the leadership of all clan rat and Skaven slave units quite garbage. The Skaven slaves have a leadership of 35. They will rout very, very fast. The clan rats have a bit increased leadership, but it is not really much. So we have just 45 on all clan rat units. But with the clan Vulcan tail slashers, we have a bit increased amount of leadership. Their leadership is 55, but overall, all clan red units and all Skaven slave units have a very, very low amount of leadership, and they will rout very, very fast. So let's come to the first mid-range infantry unit, the Plague Monks. These guys are a anti-infantry unit. They have in fact a real anti-infantry bonus of 7. The amount of AP damage is still garbage, it's just 8, so against heavily armored targets these guys struggle a lot. The amount of armor is is also very, very low. We have just 10. This is complete garbage, is nearly 0. Therefore we have a physical resistance of 15%. Also the amount of armor on the clan rats and the Skaven slaves was complete garbage. The Skaven slaves have nearly no armor and the clan rats have an amount of 25, and this is very, very low. So also the Plague Monks are very unarmored, you can say, and they will get a lot of damage. I wouldn't they count as a damage dealer unit, so the damage output is quite good. We have an amount of weapon strength of 32. This is overall quite nice. The melee attack is 28 and the melee defense is 24. So overall the stats are quite decent, but a very important point is also the leadership. As I said, the all clan rats and the Skaven slave have a very bad leadership. These guys have nearly 70. This is very, very good for a Skaven unit. They have an ability called Frenzy. Many of you know this. This is a constant ability that will increase the weapon damage by 12%, the charge bonus by 8%, and the melee attack by 8. And these guys are immune to psychology if the leadership is lower than 50%. A quite nice standard ability. So against factions that are able to bring a lot of infantry units, non-armored or mid-range or low-tier infantry units to the battlefield, like the Greenskins, Plague Monks can really pay off, because they are still quite cheap with 750 credits, and the damage output is quite decent. As I said, they are a damage dealer unit and a mid-range infantry unit, and a quite good unit from the Skaven, and in many cases worth to bring to the battlefield. So let's come to the next mid-range infantry unit, the Death Runners. These guys not counting, it's not shown up. They not count as a damage dealer unit, but in fact they have a quite high damage output. The melee attack is 36. This is massive. They have an ability called Weeping Blade that will reduce the armor by 50% for 35 seconds with their melee attack. This is massive. The melee defense is therefore quite low. For that price we have just 28, but we have a very good weapon strength of 30, and these guys, it's not shown in the tooltips, but these guys have a very, very good amount of AP damage for that price. So we have a amount of 22. This is quite nice for a unit that is not declared as an AP unit. This is very, very nice. The Death Runners are a tactical unit. They have stalk, so they are hidden. They have dodge, so they can dodge or a lot of damage from their enemies. This is quite nice. They have an ability called concealment bombs. This will target themselves for 67 seconds, for a duration of 67 seconds. They are hidden then, they have stalk, and they are unspottable. And of course, for some sneak attacks, it's very effective when you like to flank and stuff like that. They are able to get deployed in a vanguard position, very, very strong, because as I said, the best use is as a tactical unit. Place them in the terrain, anywhere in the woods or also in open terrain. They have stalk, and if the armies get engaged in fight, you can do some sneak attacks and attack your enemy from behind, or also his archers and stuff. They have a very high speeds for a unit. The speed is 54. This is very, very good for an infantry unit. Therefore, as I said, the defense stats are very bad. The amount of armor is just 20. The leadership is quite nice with 70, but overall this is a very, very strong unit. As I said, good AP stats, good damage output. They have this Weeping Blade ability, very, very strong. That will reduce the ammo by 50%, as I already mentioned. So in many cases, the Death Runners are really worth to bring to the battlefield as a tactical unit. In a tactical sense, don't put them just in your front line. I would say in a tactical sense, in anywhere on the battlefield, in the vanguard deployment, these guys can really pay off in many matchups, and they are really, really cost efficient. So let's talk about the Storm Vermin with Halberds. This is the first elite infantry unit. These guys are declared as a anti-large unit. Their bonus is 70, very, very good. And they are also a AP unit, AP damage unit. The amount is 18. Quite interesting that the amount is lower than the amount of the Death Runners, but even though it's okay. The weapon strength overall is 27. This is okay. The melee defense is 32. Quite nice. The melee attack therefore is just 24. This is not so high for a unit in this price area, but we have a very heavily armored Skaven unit. The amount is 90, so this is quite nice. The leadership is 60, also okay. They have a charge defense against large foes, and yeah, nothing more to talk about. They have strength in numbers also, and scurry away. All infantry units have these two abilities, so I stop talking about this over here. The most important point is that they are a very strong anti-large unit, and for 1000 credits in many matchups worth to bring to the battlefield, because as I said, they have in addition a quite nice anti-large bonus, and they're really able to handle it against monsters and stuff like that, or also to hold the line against infantry units for some time. So the Storm Vermin are, I would say, a very important unit, this Halberd version over here. The Storm Vermin are important for the Skaven, but if we compare them against other anti-large elite infantry units, the Storm Vermin are definitely not able to compete against many of them. So let's come to the Storm Vermin with Sword and Shield. These guys are shielded. They have a bronze shield. The stats are increased. We have an increased melee attack by 12, so this means we have overall a melee attack of 36. This is quite nice. This is quite a lot. And the melee defense is also increased by 4, so we have also a melee defense of 36. Quite nice. Increased weapon strength +7 regarding the Storm Vermin with halberds, so 34 overall, also quite nice. The only problem on these guys over here is that these guys have a very bad AP damage output. We have just 9, so this is very, very significant. The stats are all over increased, so as I said, increased melee attack, melee defense, weapon strength, and so on, also the charge bonus, but the problem is a very bad amount of AP damage. So just in very unique cases it's worth to bring these guys. In the most cases I would prefer the Storm Vermin or the Plague Monk Censer Bearers, because if you spend 1050 credits on a unit, in the most cases you would like to get a unit that is causing a good amount of AP damage at least, or a bit of amount of AP damage, and these guys have just 9, and this is garbage. So in my opinion, not worth the pick. They are, in my opinion, not cost efficient. In some very rare cases, if you're going to face up against a lot of unarmored low tier or mid-range units, these guys can pay off, but just in this cases, in other cases, Plague Monk Censer Bearers or Storm Vermin with halberds are preferable in this price area. So then let's come to the Plague Monk Censer Bearers, and the Plague Monk Censer Bearers have a very high weapon strength. We have a weapon strength of 44 overall. This is very nice. The amount of AP damage is very high. We have 31. This is very good. Unfortunately, they are very unarmored, so we have just the armor of 10. This is complete garbage. The physical resistance is there for 15%. It's okay, but not the best. The melee attack is 31. It's also good. They're causing magical attacks, and they have an ability with their melee attack called Contaminated that will last 10 seconds and will drop the leadership of the enemy by 10. So this is also quite nice. The melee defense is quite low. We have just 24. So overall, quite nice stats when it comes to the damage output, but the defense stats are quite bad. So I would count these guys, or it's also declared over here in the tooltips that these guys are a damage dealer unit. This is an elite damage dealer unit with a lot of AP damage. AP damage dealer unit. This is quite nice. But as I said, you have to be careful. These guys will also get a lot of damage. These guys have an ability called Frenzy. Nothing more to talk about. And besides from that, nothing special. The Plague Monk Censer Bearers are definitely not one of the best elite infantry units in the game, but still, for the Skaven, they have a quite nice damage output, quite nice stats, and for 1100 credits in many cases we have to bring to the battlefield, because you don't have too much options. If you want to cause a lot of damage and also AP damage, the Plague Monk Censer Bearers are in most cases the only option over here. The Death Runners, as I already mentioned, also causing a good amount of AP damage, but if you are going to face up against a lot of elite infantry units, very armored infantry units, the Plague Monk Censer Bearers, or you have to bring Plague Monk Censer Bearers to the battlefield. So there's also a Regiment of Renown version available of the Plague Monk Censer Bearers, the Blight Scabs Plague Pack. These guys have increased melee defense by 10, what is quite a lot. We have now a amount of 35, and that means these guys are really able to defend themselves, even if the armor is still garbage with 10. The melee attack is also increased by 6, and they have a bit increased leadership by 10, so 82 overall, what is quite high. The normal Plague Monk Censer Bearers have a leadership of 72, so 60 or 70 is quite nice for Skaven units, and these guys, these Blight Scabs Plague Pack, have a leadership of 82, what is really good. A really important point over here is that these guys are immune to psychology, and this is always a very strong ability. This is constantly, and they have also the Frenzy ability, what is also quite nice. But besides from that, nothing more. But for 1300 credits, I would definitely say it's worth to bring them. It's just 200 credits extra charge, but you also get a lot for your money. They are immune to psychology. They have much increased melee defense over here by 10, and also the melee attack is increased. So I would spend the 200 credits extra charge on these Blight Scabs Plague Pack. I would definitely say this is a cost efficient unit. So last but not least, we have also a Regiment of Renown unit of the Stormvermin with halberds. This is the unit, the name called. These guys are called Conceal Guard. The melee defense is much increased by 12, 44 overall. This is quite a lot of stuff. The melee attack is increased by 5, but still the melee defense is under 30, 29 over here. This is not really good, but it's okay. The leadership is 100, what is very nice, and they have a guardian ability. This is a very important fact. These guys will provide your lord or your hero a physical resistance by 18% around 30 meters. This is quite nice, so always deploy them in combination with a hero or a lord. This is very effective, and these guys are unbreakable, so the leadership of 100 means in this case that these guys are unbreakable. They will never rot off. The price is also 1300 credits, the same price like on the Regiment of Renown version. of the Plague Monk sensor barrels. The extra charge to the normal Storm Vermin with halberds is 300 credits. It's quite a lot, but you also get a lot for your money. I would definitely say these guys are worth to bring to the battlefield. I mean, these guys are unbreakable, and these guys have this Guardian ability in combination with a Lord or a Hero. This is very, very strong. So I would definitely say, if you bring Storm Vermin with halberds to the battlefield, always mix them with a unit of Council Guard. This is very, very strong. A very nice Regiment of Renown unit like the Plague Monk Sensor Bearer version, the Blightscap's Plague Pack. Both units for 1300 credits are really worth to pick, and I really like the Regiments of Renown over here. So let's talk about the Missile Infantry, and let's directly begin with a very cheap unit, the Skaven Slave Slingers. These guys have very low stats, you can say, but they have also a very low price. The price is 200 credits. They are expendable and count as a meat shield. The amount of armor is 0. The melee stats are complete garbage. You can not worth to talk about over here. The missile damage is 10, what is very low. In fact, the amount of AP damage is just 1. Also can forget this completely. The range is therefore quite nice, of 120 for a, you can say, infantry unit. These guys are not mounted. They have no arrows and stuff, so they will just throw some stones. So for this case, this range is quite nice. 120 is good. 80 or 90 would be very bad, but the range is the only positive point over here. Besides from that, nothing special. The only positive points are the price and the missile range, but besides from that, the damage output overall is horrific. So I definitely wouldn't spend the 200 credits on this unit over here, even if it is not much money. I would say it's not worth it. So let's come to a much better version of a kite unit, the Night Runners. These guys are also much more expensive. The price is overall 500, so over the double than regarding the Skaven Slave Slingers. And we have much increased stats. These guys have also increased melee stats. The melee attack, for example, is quite nice for a kite unit, 24 in fact. And the speed is increased, what is quite an important point. We have 55 overall, so they're very, very fast. The range is unfortunately reduced. We have just a missile range of 70. This is not really good, but the missile damage is increased, so we have a missile damage overall of 20. The amount of AP damage is still garbage with 2, but 20 is quite nice. The only disadvantage over here is the decreased missile range, so 70 is very, very low, so you have to be really close to the target you would like to attack or to shoot on. Besides from that, these guys have a physical resistance of 20%, quite nice, but even though the amount of armor is just 10, so they will get a lot of damage if they get caught by enemy cavalry and stuff. They are able to fire whilst moving. This is a very important characteristic. So as a kite unit, if you have a lot of APM or at least some APM, you can control these guys and drive them around, and they will fire whilst moving. The best use is of course in hands of expert players or advanced players, because you need a lot of APM, because you always have to move the Night Runners, because they are not fast as a cavalry unit. So if you stop, you get caught very, very fast. You always have to move them, and then the Night Runners are a really cost efficient unit and worth to bring to the battlefield, but it depends very strong on the player. So let's talk about the next unit, the Night Runners with slings. these guys have a much increased missile range of 70 regarding the Night Runners. So this means they have a missile range of 140. The missile damage is 16. It is not bad as from the Skaven Slave Slingers and not good like the Night Runners, but even though it's okay, 16 is okay. The price of the Night Runner slings is 500 credits, same price like the normal Night Runners. So in some cases it's really worth to bring these guys, especially because the missile damage, the missile range is increased. Unfortunately, these guys are not able to fire whilst moving. This is a bit a problem over here, but even though you have to decide if you want to fire whilst moving, then you have a very short missile range. If you like to have a higher missile range, then you pick the Night Runners with slings, therefore they are not able to fire whilst moving. So it depends. They have the dodge ability like the normal Night Runner, so they can dodge some damage, but it doesn't really matter. Worth to be mentioned is that both Night Runner units are able to get deployed in the vanguard position, so they are able to the use is in the best way in a tactical sense. As I already said, they place them anywhere on the battlefield. In this case they have no stock and stuff, so place them on a spot where they are hidden and then attack your opponent from behind, or his missile infantry or artillery or whatever. So as I said, if you want a unit with a high missile range, pick the Night Runners with slings. These guys have a higher missile range, therefore the missile damage is decreased and they are not able to fire whilst moving, and the Night Runners are able to fire whilst moving, therefore the missile range is much decreased. So it depends on your own gameplay. Both units have the same price of 500 credits. But both units are really cost efficient and really good kite units, but you have to be really be aware that these guys are quite fast for a unit that is on foot, but still if the enemy has a lot of cavalry or flying units, these guys can also get caught very fast. They don't cause any poison damage and stuff to slow down their followers, so you have to be really careful. Not in every case it's worth to bring them to the battlefield, but if you want to play with kite units, the Night Runners are really good for that because they are also quite cheap. So with a good amount of APM, these guys can really pay off. Not in all matchups, but in many matchups. It depends on the tactic, of course. So let's come to the Warp Fire Throwers, or the exact name is the Warp Fire Thrower weapons team, but let's call them Warp Fire Thrower. These guys have a massive missile damage output. The amount is 128. The amount of AP missile damage is 3. The explosive base damage is 20, and the explosive armor piercing damage is 7. So the AP damage is not really high, but the duration of their attack is quite long, so the damage output is in fact really high. They are quite a similar unit to the Iron Drakes of Dawi. In fact, the Iron Drakes have a much higher missile damage and much higher stats. But even though the damage output of the Warp Fire Thrower is still quite good, the Warp Fire Thrower are in fact cheaper. The price is 550 credits. The price of the Iron Drakes is 700. And the only problem over here is in many cases the unit itself, because it is very difficult to control these guys. You have 24 models and they are really slow. The speed is just 38. They are complete garbage in melee combat, so if they get attacked they will die almost immediately or will rout off almost immediately. So it's you can only use these guys in a very tactical sense. You have also be careful that they are not going to get attacked from enemy units. So in my opinion, it's not worth to spend the money on Warp Fire Thrower, even if the damage output per second is very good. Spend your money something else, because as I said, it's very difficult to defend these kind of units over here. Because you always have to protect them with another unit, and this means another unit is dispatched from your front line or from your army, and this makes this combination much more expensive. You always have to think like this. If you want to protect Warp Fire Thrower or Iron Drakes, you need an additional unit, and this unit is not available somewhere else, and that means this is a quite expensive combination. So I wouldn't play with these guys in a competitive sense. For fun purposes, these guys are cool, but besides from that, nothing more to talk about. Worth to be mentioned is that the Warp Thrower weapons team has this burned ability, so the leadership will drop for 10 seconds by -8 if the enemy gets hit from them, and they have causing flaming attacks and magical attacks, so this is worth to be mentioned in my opinion. So let's come to a very important unit, in my opinion, one of the most important units on the Missile Infantry roster, in my personal opinion. I'm pretty sure that many players will not share my opinion, but the Poison Wind Globadiers are a very strong unit. These guys are anti-large. The price of 600 credits is regarding to their damage output on large entities very good. We have a price of 600 credits. This is very cost efficient. The missile damage is 35, but we have an amount of AP missile damage of 36, and this is very strong. And in addition, a bonus versus large of 32. This is a very strong factor over here. So if these guys throw their balls or the grenades on the enemy large entities, or also heavily armored monsters, the damage output is really good. The only disadvantage is the small missile range. So we have a very small missile range of 85, so they have to be really close to their dragons or monsters they would like to kill, and this is of course a quite dangerous, because they are also quite slow with a speed of 38. So if the monster deciding to attack these guys, they are in many cases very close to them, and it's very easy to get them, and they will get a lot of damage in a very fast period of time, even if they are very heavily armored. So the amount of armor is incredible high. We have 100, but we have a very bad melee defense of 16, so it's not really the best. The weapon strength is quite okay with 26, but the melee attack is just 18, so forget this completely in melee attack. But a quite interesting factor is, as I said, the amount of armor. This means also that enemy missiles are not able to damage these guys very fast, because they are very heavily armored. So you need AP missile damage to send them offline, and for this case the amount of armor is quite nice. So as I said, it's quite dangerous for these guys to get very close to their monsters, but if they are on a very good spot and throw their bombs on the monsters, the damage output is gigantic, and I really love to play with these guys, especially because they are really cheap. 600 credits or 1200 credits for 2 groups is really good, and in many cases I pick these guys if I'm pretty sure that I'm going to face up against a lot of large entities. So let's come to the gutter runner slingers. These guys have a quite have much better, or not much but better stats than the night runners. This is also a kite unit. The most interesting point is probably that these guys have stalk, so they are hidden in any terrain. Very nice. And they have an ability called Snare Net. So the Snare Net will reduce the speed of units around in a range of 45 meters, and that will decrease their speed by 20%. Quite nice over here. They have a physical resistance of 20%. They are also able to get deployed in a vanguard position. The missile range is quite high, so we have a missile range of 140. This is quite nice, the same missile range like the night runners with slings, but they have are not able to fire whilst moving. This is a bit of disadvantage. The amount of AP damage is still very low, so the only good thing over here, or the most significant point, is that these guys have stalk. The melee stats are overall not really bad for a kite unit. We have an attack of 26 and a defense of 20, so against low tier infantry units they can defend themselves for some time. The weapon strength is also quite nice with 28, so this is also a quite positive point over here. But as I already said, the most important point is the stalk ability. These guys have also the dodge ability, so they can dodge some enemy damage, but besides from that, nothing more to talk about. The price is 750 credits, so in summary quite pricey, but we have the stalk ability over here, and this is a very strong factor. If you are fighting in a terrain without many forests and stuff like that, the stalk ability is a very strong factor, especially because you can move around all over the place, and you are hidden, and for tactical gameplay this is very important. So it depends on your tactic. So you can definitely say the stalk ability is in some cases worth the extra charge, but not in all. It depends very strong on your gameplay and your tactic. So if you want to do some sneak attacks, these guys are a good option for that. So let's come to the gutter runners. These guys have, regarding the gutter runner slingers, a decreased missile range. The thing over here is that this is the fire whilst moving version. So regarding the normal gutter runner slingers, these guys are able to fire whilst moving. Therefore also here, like on the night runners, the missile range is much decreased. We have just amount of 70, but we have a bit increased missile damage. The missile damage overall is 23. This is quite nice. The AP damage is still quite low with 3. So if you want a gutter runner version that is able to fire whilst moving, pick the normal gutter runners. These guys are able to fire whilst moving, and they have stalk, and the price is the same like the gutter runner slingers, 750 credits. So a quite nice version, fire whilst moving in combination with stalk, also able to get deployed in a vanguard position. So nothing more to talk about over here. The only problem is still that these guys have a quite low AP damage, but besides from that, a quite nice kite unit over here. So let's come to the next unit, the Rattling Gun Weapons Team. This is a new unit, and these guys causing a tremendous amount of damage. The damage output is gigantic. If you look at the damage per second, you can test this unit on your own. It is really tremendous, and I'm pretty sure that these guys will get a nerf, because 2 or 3 groups of these guys in a correct position, in a good position, can cause such a tremendous amount of damage in a very short period of time that everything in range will drop very fast. And in my opinion is that CA probably will nerf these guys, because as I said, the damage output per second is very high, with the amount of 339. The amount of AP missile damage is just 6, but it doesn't really matter. The shoots per volley are 18, and it adds up very fast. And as I said, in game it is really tremendous, even if the AP missile damage is quite low. They have an ability called Suppressed. For 10 seconds the enemy the speed of the enemy is reduced by 36%, and yeah, they count as an AP missile damage unit. They have a bit of AP missile damage, and as I said, the 6 AP missile damage over here will add up very, very fast. The missile range is also quite nice. We have a range of 145. It's not the best, but it's okay. In melee combat you can forget this completely, but the amount of armor is quite nice with 70, so that means they get not sniped out very fast from enemy archers. Enemy archers need AP missile damage to kill these guys very, very fast. Otherwise they have a quite good armor and can defend themselves from enemy arrows and stuff. But in melee combat these guys are complete garbage. You can't forget this completely. These guys call as damage dealer unit. Literally, these guys are damage dealers. Nothing more to talk about. The only problem over here is that you always have to find a correct spot. The missiles go very straight, so they have no angle or stuff like that. You have to be above your other units, above the front line, not to shoot on your own units, on that these guys are not blocked. But if you find the right spot, these guys really annihilate everything in the range. And but as I said, it's quite difficult in some terrains. It's not so easy to place these guys on a correct spot. Same with the warp fire throwers or with the iron drakes. This is a very straight shooting without any angle, like from arrows and stuff. You cannot shoot above your front line. You have to be a little bit above with your unit or behind the front line to shoot on the enemy, and this is the only problem over here. The price of 800 credits is really worth it. They're definitely worth the pick, even if the performance depends very strong on the possibility on which spot these guys can be placed on the battlefield, and also your own capability to protect them. So let's come to the Deathclaw Bombardiers, and these guys are the anti-infantry version of the Poison Wind Bombardiers. They have a much increased missile damage by 36. This is quite a lot of stuff. Therefore, the AP missile damage is much decreased. We have just 16 regarding from the Poison Wind Bombardiers 36. So this is much decreased over here. But therefore, we have a explosive armor piercing damage of 33. This is quite nice. In fact, we don't have any real anti-infantry bonus, so the high missile damage overall means that these guys are designed to throw their bombs on infantry units and annihilate everything there. But there is no real anti-infantry bonus over here. So in fact, you can use these guys also to throw the bombs on large targets. But in this case, the Poison Wind Bombardiers are much more effective because of the anti-large bonus, of course. Besides from that, not much more to talk about. Other stats are similar. The leadership is a bit increased regarding the normal Poison Wind Bombardiers. The hit points are a bit increased, but not worth to be mentioned. These little fellows over here are really perfect if you're going to face up against a lot of elite infantry, because as I already explained, the Skaven infantry is for itself not able to crack a very heavy infantry from Chaos or from the High Elves and stuff like that, from Darwi, and then you need support, and these guys are really perfect for that. They really support your infantry. They put them in the third row or the second row, let them units get engaged, and then these guys will throw their bombs on the front line, and you can kill in a very short period of time really elite infantry units then, and this is really cool. Also, the explosions will disrupt enemy formations, and in this case against very elite infantry units, it is a very good support for your own infantry. The missile range is still quite low with 85, so it's quite dangerous. So I would prefer the Poison Wind Bombardiers in matches when you're going to face up against a lot of large entities. The Deathclaw Bombardiers, just in some cases, I also played with these guys, but just in some cases directly behind your front line. If the units get engaged, you can use these guys to throw the bombs on the enemy front line, and spots will break up very fast then. So in some tactics, in my opinion, I really like them. but in many cases I prefer the Poison Wind Globadiers if it comes to large entities. Against infantry units there are also other tools like a normal play car catapult and stuff like that. But and we don't have to forget the price for the Deathclaw Bombardiers over here. This anti-infantry version is quite high. We have 850 credits, so 2 units have a quite high price then. So it's not so cheap anymore like the Poison Wind Globadiers. So if you're going to face up against a lot of infantry units, you can test the Deathclaw Bombardiers in the case I told you, and you have to decide for your own. In some cases I really bring them, I really like them, even if they're quite expensive and not so efficient like the Poison Wind Globadiers on large entities. So let's come to the Gutter Runner Slingers with poison, and the only difference over here is that these guys causing poison regarding the normal Gutter Runner Slingers. But poison is always good, because if your enemy will send you cavalry units and stuff like that, as I already mentioned, we don't have to forget all kite units over here are on foot. Even if the speed is quite nice for units on foot, every cavalry unit is faster. And that means poison is very nice on all kite units, because you can throw your missiles, or you can shoot on your followers, and then the speed of them get reduced, and it's very difficult for them now to get you or to get your kite unit. And for this case, poison is always good, and especially in this case, because many other factions have cavalry or flying units, and in this case Gutter Runner Slingers with poison have a natural protection over here to defend themselves from faster units that are chasing them. And in this case, it's, in my opinion, probably always preferable to get the poison version before the normal version. The extra charge is just 100 credits, and the poison damage here is really worth the price, because it's a natural protection from followers, or from charging units, or from enemy cavalry that is chasing you. So let's come to the Gutter Runners with poison. Same here, not much more to talk about. The extra charge is to the normal Gutter Runners, just 100, and here we have a very strong point. I would never pick the Gutter Runner Slingers with poison, because these guys have to stay to shoot. The Gutter Runners with poison are the Firewise moving version. I know it's very complicated, everything, but you can see these guys are able to fire whilst moving, and that means if an enemy is chasing you with cavalry, flying units and stuff like that, you don't have to stop to shoot on him. You can still move, and these guys shoot on your enemy, and that they will get slowed down, and then it's very difficult to get you. If you have to stop, like with the Gutter Runner Slinger version, even if the missile range is much higher, your opponent has much higher chance to get you. So I would never pick the Gutter Runner Slingers with poison. If you want to spend your money on a kite unit with poison, always pick the Gutter Runners with poison, because these guys are able to fire whilst moving, and this is a much better protection. Like if you just have to stay and to shoot on enemy cavalry and stuff like what is chasing you, this is a problem. Fire whilst moving is much more effective then. So let's come to a new unit, the Warlock Chisels. I'm sorry if I mispronounced this. Here we have a very strong Missile Infantry unit, The price is quite high with 900 credits, but we have a very good damage output of 39. The AP missile damage is 30. This is very high. They have an ability called Shield Breaker that will reduce the missile parry by 24 for 10 seconds. This is quite nice. For example, the combination of Warlock Chisels with, for example, Rattling Gun Weapon team, because these guys will reduce the missile parry and the Rattling Gun Weapons team can do the rest. Then this is a quite nice combination, and the missile range is very high. We have a missile range of 300, so they can start to shoot very early, and you need a good position for these guys also here, because they are shooting very straight. But on the right spot, these guys are really good. They have in fact a silver shield, so they can protect themselves from enemy arrows. So if your opponent like to send them offline really fast, they have to break the silver shield. And also they are quite heavily armored with 70, so this is quite good. Also the melee stats are not so bad. We have a melee attack of 16, but therefore a melee defense of 25. Because of the silver shield, of course, and a weapon strength of 26. So even if they get attacked for some seconds, they can hold the line. But the most positive point over here is definitely the missile range of 300. This is incredible. They have a missile range, you can say, like our artillery unit. This is nearly like our artillery unit. This is quite nice, and the damage output is really good. They have causing AP missile damage, so they can cause a tremendous amount of damage also to heavily armored units. They have just 25 models that shoot one single projectile. So, but even though I made some tests, the damage output is still quite good. And as I said, they have the shield breaker ability, and this is really quite nice in combination with other stuff. So a really good unit. As you can see in the tooltips, good range is shown up over here, and this is really true. And I really like this unit over here. Very well done, and for 900 credits, really cost efficient. I really like to play with these guys, and I think this is also a competitive pick in the future. So there's also a Regiment of Renown version available, the Natty Bubos Sharpshooters. Sorry if I also mispronounced that. The melee defense is increased, so the melee stats are overall increased. Quite nice, because we can see we have now a melee defense of 35. So they're really able to hold the line for some time, even if they, of course, nearly doing no damage, but they can defend themselves at least for some seconds. The missile damage is increased, so 47 now. This is very good. But besides from that, just one change over here. They have a snipe ability. That means this unit over here remains hidden while firing. This is a very strong ability. That means these guys can shoot, but your opponent cannot see them. So in many cases, if a unit has stalk or stuff like that, if they start to shoot, they are revealed, so your opponent can see them. In this case, these guys can shoot, and your opponent can still not see them. And you have to think they have a high missile range of 300, so you can shoot very early, and your opponent cannot see them. This is a very strong characteristic. They have stalk, and in combination with the sniper ability, that means they are always hidden. They are just revealed if your opponent is very close to them. So this is a very strong characteristic, especially because think about your opponent is not able to snipe them out with artillery. So with a normal group of Warlock Chisels, your opponent can see them, and your opponent can adjust his artillery to shoot on this unit over here. But on these Natty Bubos Sharpshooters, it is not possible, because he can simply not see them, just if he is very close to them. So a very nice unit over here. The extra charge is 250 credits, but I would definitely say it's worth to bring them, because you have no disadvantage, and 250 credits for this ability over here. Sniper ability is very good, And you don't have to forget you have also increased missile damage, at least a bit, and some increased melee stats, but this is not really significant. The AP missile damage is still 30, but I would definitely say it's worth to pick a really cost-efficient unit over here, a really good unit. I like this Regiment of Renown version. So there is also a Regiment of Renown version of the Rattling Gun Weapons team available. The extra charge is 200 credits, so the price is 1000 regarding the normal Rattling Gun Weapons team. And the missile damage is much increased, so we have a missile damage of 72, and as I already told you, the normal missile damage was still incredibly high if it comes to the damage per second, and now we have a much increased missile damage, and you know what this means. These guys slice and dice everything in their range, so this is very, very dangerous. In many cases you will see that your opponent will learn very fast that he has to send these guys offline because the damage output is tremendous. I saw some units directly, very healthy infantry units, running towards my group of Teeth Breakers, and they get sliced and diced within seconds. So this is incredible. They can kill a very healthy group of infantry very, very fast, so your opponent has to do everything to send them offline because the damage output is so high. So the Teeth Breakers are, in my opinion, worth to bring to the battlefield, even if the extra charge is 200 credits, because the missile damage is much increased by 72. But in some cases it's maybe better to bring two groups of normal Rattling Gun Weapons team. Two groups for 1600 credits are, in my opinion, much more effective than more efficient than one group of Teeth Breakers, an additional group of Rattling Gun Weapons team for 1800 credits. So in some cases I would prefer the normal Rattling Gun Weapons team if you pick two, but if you pick one single unit I would always pick the Teeth Breakers. So let's talk about the monsters and the beasts, and let's start with the Red Ogres. And the Red Ogres are a multiple monster AP damage unit like the Trolls. In fact, the Trolls are much better. Trolls have the same price, 800 credits, but have a much higher weapon strength, a much higher AP damage, a much higher melee attack, and so on. This is a quite interesting fact. So Trolls always outpower these Red Ogres, in fact, but still you don't have too much monster units on your Skaven roster, so Red Ogres can really pay off in many matchups. In fact, I really like the Red Ogres. They have the frenzy ability with all these buffs. They're causing fear. Unfortunately, no terror, so no terror out over here. This is not so good. The weapon strength is 80, what is quite nice, and the amount of AP damage is also really good with 58, even if it is not so high like from the Trolls, as I already mentioned. The melee attack and the melee defense is 26 on both sides. It's not the best, but we have a very high weapon strength, so the damage output is still quite good. You can say this is a multiple entity damage dealer monster unit. The amount of armor is 30, also really low. So as I said, Trolls are much better, so there are some better options in this game when it comes to multiple monster units, but the Red Ogres are still good because, as I said, on the Skaven roster you don't have too much monster tools, and in some cases Red Ogres can really help your infantry to crack enemy infantry, massive heavily armored infantry units like from the High Elves or Dark Elves. You don't have to forget that you are not going to win a game against factions that are very heavily armored like Chaos Dawi, Dark Elves, High Elves. You're not going to win these games just with your infantry. Your infantry is not able to win these games. You need support from other arms of service like from artillery, war machines, or missile infantry, or monsters, and for this case the Red Ogres are really perfect. Drag Ogres or multiple monster units like Red Ogres or Trolls are designed to fight other infantry units, especially armored infantry units, and in this cases the red ogres are the only option on the roster for a unit like this. And but here the performance in combination with the infantry in these matchups is really good in many cases, and for 800 credits I would definitely count them as cost efficient, even if the trolls for the exact same price are much better. But on this roster you need red ogres in many cases, and I would definitely say they are worth the price over here. Just for example, if we compare the red ogres to the animated hulks, the same kind of unit, multiple monster AP damage unit, also the animated hulks are better for 750 credits. They have a much higher weapon strength. Only the melee defense is a bit increased, but the other stats besides the charge bonus are increased, also the hit points. So the red ogres are definitely not the best unit when it comes to this kind of unit in the game, but still for the Skaven I really like them, and in this roster over here they really pay off. One big purpose of all multiple entity monster units is to disrupt the formation of your enemy in the front line. Your own units will get engaged, your own infantry units will get engaged with the infantry units of the enemy, and when there is no other factor, the stronger infantry is going to win. Multiple monster entity units will fight within or surrounded from your own infantry, however, in the front line, and they will disrupt the enemy formation, and this is a big advantage also for your own infantry. So the combination of multiple monster units with infantry in the front line is very strong, especially also to disrupt the enemy formation and to break it up. So let's talk about the Hell Pit Abomination, and this is a huge monster, and the problem is with all single entity monsters is that the danger is their size, because they are a huge target for handgunners, for thunderers, for artillery, for all these kind of units. This is a huge target. And this is of course with all single entity monsters a problem. So you have to decide if you can handle the dangers, or if it is a matchup in which you are pretty sure that a Hell Pit Abomination can pay off. This thing over here can cause a tremendous amount of damage in enemy infantry ranks. We have a huge amount of AP damage of 365 and a weapon strength of 520. I would definitely say the best use is in enemy infantry ranks, but we can also say with this kind, or with this huge weapon strength and AP damage, also against other monsters. In some cases you can use this thing over here to attack other monsters, but you have to be careful. This thing is it feels that it is very slow. The speed is in fact not really bad with 58, but the feeling is that it is very slow, and if a Carnosaur or stuff can run away very fast, so it doesn't really it isn't really an anti-large monster. So the best use is definitely in infantry. Don't spend the time to charge or to hunt down enemy monsters with this thing over here. The best use is in enemy infantry ranks, and here this thing can cause a tremendous amount of damage. The melee defense is quite low with 30, but therefore we have a high melee attack with 42. In combination with the weapon strength, the damage output is tremendous. The leadership is 90, so it don't start to rout very fast. This is quite nice. The amount of armor is quite low with 50, but we have we have regeneration, what is a quite interesting fact. We have a missile resistance of 50%, so also enemy missiles cannot, they will cause, this will add up, so the missile resistance is quite nice, but it's just a small factor over here. This thing causing fear and terror. Regeneration, as I already mentioned, and a very important point over here is the ability called Too Horrible to Die. So when it dies, you have a 50% chance that a unit of Skaven slaves will drop out of the body over here. In some cases this is quite nice, because your opponent has an additional danger to handle, and in some cases it's quite nice, but as I said, it's 50-50. It's in some cases it will happen and others not. Besides from that, nothing special. As I said, I would count this, or the best use is, in my opinion, against enemy infantry. It's not an anti-large monster, even if on paper the damage output is quite nice. But as I said, it's quite slow, this thing over here. The price is 1,800 credits, so it's quite expensive in my opinion. A bit too expensive. 1,600 credits would be much more efficient in my opinion. So I bring a Hellpit Abomination in very rare cases, even if I would say it's still cost efficient in some matchups. But it's very expensive and a huge monster, and like all monsters, as I explained, it's in many matchups very dangerous to bring to the battlefield, and 1,800 credits is quite a lot of stuff. And if your enemy is able to snap this thing out very fast, this is very, very bad, because it's 20% of your whole army you spend on this monster, and this is always a quite dangerous decision. So just in some cases it's worth to bring the Hellpit Abomination, in some rare cases, in others definitely not. So let's come to the artillery and the war machines. A very strong factor over here, a very strong arm of service. The monsters and the beasts are not so well stocked. It's definitely not the strength of the Skaven, but the artillery and the war machines are a really strong factor. Let's begin with the Plague Claw Catapult. This thing over here causing a tremendous amount of damage to enemy infantry units. The amount of damage is 158. This is a very strong catapult. If we compare it, for example, to the Grudge Thrower from Darwi, let's do this for a second. We can clearly see that the Darwi Grudge Thrower has a bit decreased missile damage, but overall we have nearly the same stats. The only advantage of the Grudge Thrower is that it has a higher missile range. The AP damage is we have an explosive AP damage of the Grudge Thrower of 65, and on the Plague Claw Catapult we have 70. So there are some advantages on the Plague Claw Catapult, but also on the Grudge Thrower. Both are in the same skill area, I would say, but it's a very strong catapult. The Plague Claw Catapult for 900 credits, it's definitely worth the price. It's really, really cheap. Of course, we don't have to forget the Grudge Thrower has a price of 700 credits. It's much cheaper, but even though the Plague Claw Catapult is really, really strong, we have a ability called Contaminated. For 10 seconds the leadership will drop by -10. So the leadership drop in catapult versions, I really love that, because you can do in the pre-combat a good amount of damage, and in some cases you can bring enemy infantry units to rout before they get engaged in the front line, in a frontline fight. This is always a very nice factor if catapults have this will cause a leadership drop. The missile range is 400, as I said, really, really good, even if the missile range of the Grudge Thrower is a little bit higher. Besides from that, nothing more to talk about. We have a explosive armor piercing damage of 70, and the splash damage, the base splash damage is 35. Nothing more to talk about. A really good catapult, a really cost efficient unit, and in many cases it's worth to bring to the battlefield, because you don't do anything wrong for 900 credits to bring a catapult, especially against factions or builds that are probably bringing a lot of elite units, elite infantry units to the battlefield. In this case, the Plague Claw Catapult definitely pays off, because with a very low amount of money you can do a quite devastating amount of damage to elite units that would otherwise damage your own infantry. And in this case, against very elite units, the Plague Claw Catapult is really strong. I wouldn't bring it again in builds, in heavy infantry builds from Greenskin or Beastmen. In this case, I definitely would say it will not pay off. So rather against very elite builds, very elite infantry builds. So let's come to the Warp Lightning Cannon, a very strong cannon, even if the Warp Lightning Cannon is on paper not so good like the Darwi Cannon or the Hammer of Witches. The cannon is still very, very strong, especially because the projectile is very, very fast. It's very difficult, in my feeling, to dodge this. Maybe CA would say to me it's the same speed like from a normal cannon or for the Hammer of Witches, but it feels like that the Warp Lightning Cannon has a much faster projectile, and in my opinion it is much more difficult to dodge it. The accuracy is much higher, and this is the strong characteristic of the Warp Lightning Cannon. The price is 1,000 credits. Very cost efficient, really strong for that price. The missile damage is 194, the AP missile damage is 260, gigantic, and in addition you have a bonus versus large of 70. The cannon of the Dawi, for example, has a much higher base AP missile damage of 336, but therefore no anti-large bonus. That means in many cases that the cannon of the Dawi cannon is better, for especially because the price is just 800 credits, and you have without the anti-large bonus a much higher base damage, so you can shoot on everything. It doesn't matter if it is a large entity or a small entity. Of course you always prefer a large entity because the splash damage of a cannon is not that high like from a catapult, for example, so it naturally means that you, with a cannon, you shoot on large entities. And so the bonus versus large is very important on the Warp Lightning Cannon. The missile range is 430. This is quite high, but even though the cannon of Dawi has a higher missile range of 440, but it doesn't really matter. 430 is still very good. It's just a small difference over here. Besides from that, nothing special. A very strong cannon over here. Could call it very high accuracy. In my opinion, the highest accuracy. This is my personal feeling. As I said, I can be wrong, and this is the most important characteristic, but in any case the damage output and the performance is really good, and for 1000 credits really worth the salt, even if the Dawi cannon or the Hammer of Witches is on paper, or when we look on the stats detailed, they are a bit better and a bit more cost efficient. You have to be, of course, also here you have to place them in a correct position. My feeling is also here that the shooting that the cannon will shoot at a higher position, because the whole construction is a bit higher than a normal Dawi cannon. So if you look at the normal Dawi cannon, you can see it shoots much on much lower ground because it's much smaller. That means you have to place it on a spot where it is able to shoot on a bit higher area. Of course, the Dawi cannon has a bit of angle, so you can shoot above your front line, but the Warp Lightning Cannon can do this naturally because, as I said, the whole construction is much higher. I hope you get what I mean, but this is what I noticed. Besides from that, nothing special. A very important point is that the Warp Lightning Cannon causing magical attacks. The Dawi cannon or the Hammer of Witches is causing magical attacks, but the normal Dawi cannon isn't able to cause magical attacks. So this is also quite nice characteristic of the Warp Lightning Cannon over here. But besides from that, nothing more to talk about. Let's continue. So we have also a regiment of renowned version. Give me a break. The Ikit Zap Zap. The missile damage is much increased, so the base missile damage is 249 plus 55 regarding the normal Warp Lightning Cannon. We have increased leadership and melee attack, but forget this completely. Quite positive point is also the ability Zap for 10 seconds. The recharge ability is reduced by 10. I'm not sure in which cases this is important or useful, but the most important characteristic is, as I said, the ability or the higher missile damage. The AP missile damage is 260, and we have also a bonus versus large, so this is the same like on the normal warp lightning cannon. So the base missile damage is increased, and this is the more important stuff over here. I'm not sure if it is worth to spend the 200 credits extra charge, because the damage output on the normal warp lightning cannon is still quite good, and besides from that there are not much more except for the sub ability. So in my opinion, I would pick the normal warp lightning cannon and leave out this Regiment of Renown unit, is my opinion. So let's come to the war machines, and we have some new war machines, these Doomflyers. These things are a smaller version of the Doom Wheel. In fact, we have a smaller weapon strength, a smaller charge bonus, but therefore we have a higher amount of hit points, and this is because these things are coming in a group of 3 entities. So you spend 1200 credits on a group of Doomflyers, and you will get 3 entities. With one Doom Wheel you have just 1 entity. It also means, of course, that if one entity is stuck in a group of units, it's not so easy to pull it out. The group has to collect again and stuff like that, so there are some small problems, but I made several tests, and the mass of these things is incredibly good. So they go through the enemy infantry ranks like a hot knife through butter, and this is very, very strong. The performance is very, very good. As I said, the only disadvantage with a several entity group is that you have to collect all 3, and one of them can get stuck in enemy infantry groups. But besides from that, the damage output is really, really strong. The price is unfortunately quite high, so we have 1200 credits. This is not much cheaper than a Doom Wheel, in fact, but I still see in some cases, in some tactical use, I see some cases where Doomflyers can really pay off, especially because they have a really high mass, and then it is really fun to drive through enemy infantry ranks. The speed is 72 like on the normal Doom Wheel, so it's not that high. 72, many cavalry units are much faster and stuff, so you have to be really careful. If your enemy brings a lot of cavalry to the battlefield, Doomflyers with the several entity group are really vulnerable. But as I said, in some cases these guys are really worth to bring to the battlefield. I would call them cost efficient, even if I would say it's just in some cases worth to bring, not in all, definitely not in all. So there's also Regiment of Renown version available, the Dwarf Thing Menace. What I not mentioned is that these Doomflyers have a quite high weapon strength. So the weapon strength is 95. The amount of AP damage is very good with 65 on both versions, and we have a bonus versus infantry in addition of 26. So on paper, with the weapon strength, the damage output is really good. On the normal Doomflyers we have a melee attack of 26 and a melee defense of 21. So even if the weapon strength is really high, this thing is not designed to stay for a very long time in enemy infantry ranks. You can stay there for a short period of time. This thing can cause a quite good amount of damage then, but then I would pull it out. The amount of armor is quite good with 100 on both versions, so that means it's not so easy to crack. But as I said, the melee attack and the defense, this kind of stuff over here is not the best. On the Dwarf Thing Menace, the stats are a bit increased. We have a higher melee attack by 6, so a melee attack of 32 overall, and a quite much higher melee defense by increased by 9, so we have 30 over here. That means this thing is much better in melee defense, especially because the Dwarf Thing Menace has an ability called the Best Defense. So this will trigger when this thing is in melee combat, and this will get a armor buff by 24, so it's much higher armor. So we have then a amount of armor of 124, so it's much more difficult to crack. So that means that the Dwarf Thing Menace is much more designed to stay in melee combat, especially because it has also a ability, the Sundering Armor ability, that will reduce the ammo of your opponent by 30 for 10 seconds in melee combat, also quite nice. And the Dwarfing Menace is causing fear, the normal Doomflyer is not causing fear, so everything tells you this thing is designed to stay for a longer time in melee combat. The extra charge is 250 credits, but I would still not say I would spend the extra charge on this Regiment of Renown unit. This is a bit complicated. As I said, you can stay with Doomflyers for a short period of time in melee combat because the damage output is high, but the melee stats are not the best, and even on the Dwarfing Menace, I would definitely also not say that it's worth to stay there. The best use is also here to pull it out and drive through another way and use the charge bonus on another group of infantry unit. So I haven't done many tests with these Dwarfing Menace, but I would still prefer the Doomflyers in this case for some tactical use. You can also stay in melee combat for a very short period of time, doing some melee combat damage, and then you drive out and drive in another group, use the charge bonus and causing on another spot some trouble. So I wouldn't spend the 250 credits on the Dwarfing Menace over here. But the price is overall quite high. You can get for the same price now a Doom Wheel, and yeah, nothing more to talk about. So let's come to the Doom Wheel, and the Doom Wheel has a much higher weapon strength. Overall we have a weapon strength of 270. This is incredible. The charge bonus is increased. We have a higher charge bonus, 50 over here, and the AP damage is much more massive. We have 176, and we have a higher bonus versus infantry of 30, and this is exactly what I mean. You have a decreased melee attack regarding the Doomflyer Menace, regarding the Dwarfing Menace, but we have a much higher damage output. So I would spend these 1450 credits always on a Doom Wheel instead of the Dwarfing Menace. Pick Doomflyers or pick a Doom Wheel, but the Doomflyer Menace is not worth to bring. The Doom Wheel overall has, in addition, ability to shoot, so the missile damage is in fact 80. All of you know you cannot control this, so this thing shoots all the time, completely random. But the nice thing is, if this thing is surrounded from enemy artillery, cavalry and stuff like that, it always shoots on the closest target. This is quite nice, and the damage output is quite good. In addition, so we have 80. The AP missile damage is 45. And we have an explosive armor piercing damage of 20, a splash AP damage of 20. This is a quite nice amount of damage. Only problem is, of course, that it is completely random. But even though in many cases at least it's doing some missile damage, and this is quite nice. The missile damage is causing magical attacks, also a quite nice factor. So as I said, the Doom Wheel is a very strong chariot, has a very high mass. It's a single entity, a much bigger one like the Doomflyers, but it is much easier to control because you have just one entity, and it's not so easy to get that this thing gets stuck in enemy infantry ranks. So you need APM for controlling all chariots, but a single entity chariot is, in my opinion, quite nice to control, because it's not so easy to stack this thing. If you have 3 entities, it's much easier that at least 1 or 2 of these entities are stuck in a group or stuff like that. Besides from that, nothing special. Doom Wheel is a very strong chariot. If you are not facing up against a lot of cavalry, and especially anti-large cavalry, because I noticed a Doom Wheel is really able to kill at least low tier cav and mid-range, in some cases also mid-range cav, but against some blood knights and stuff like that, this thing is completely screwed. So you have to be careful. But if you bring a chariot to the battlefield, the Doom Wheel is a very strong competitor. So last but not least, we have also a Regiment of Renown version of the Doom Wheel, the Wheels of Doom. I forgot to notice that the Doom Wheel is not only causing fear like the Dwarfing Menace. The Doomfly is not causing anything, the Dwarfing Menace is causing at least fear. The Doom Wheel is causing fear and terror, and the Wheels of Doom also. This is quite nice over here. This, I forgot to notice this. The missile damage is much increased. I'm not sure if this will pay off. As I said, it's still random where this thing shoots. The melee attack is increased by 5, so not so much. We have a melee attack of 29 on the Wheels of Doom. It's still not the best. The melee defense is therefore much increased, so we have plus 12, 44 overall, and in addition with the high amount of armor, like on all chariots of the Skaven, the amount is 100. In addition with this high melee defense of 44, it is really able to defend themselves in melee combat, so you can also stay for a quite good amount of time in enemy infantry ranks. But as I still say, the charge bonus of 50, you have to use this, and just to stay in melee combat, even if the damage output is quite good, or if it can defend yourselves, you have to use the charge bonus. Stay for some bit in melee combat, drive out and drive to another group, causing there some trouble, stay there in melee combat and drive to another group. But it's a quite nice characteristic with the melee defense. The problem over here is that the price overall is 1700 credits, and this is a lot of stuff. In my opinion, unfortunately, too expensive. I wouldn't spend so much money on one chariot. Even with the increased melee defense, I would say it's not worth to bring. The missile damage is much higher. We have plus 123. But even though, as I said, it's random, and in my opinion, not worth to spend the 350 credits extra charge. So this is in my, it's not 250 credits, sorry, I have to calculate correct over here. I would say it's not worth to bring it. I would leave it out. In this case, it is definitely too expensive. But this was everything from the units. This was a detailed analysis of each unit on the roster. And now let's take a closer look on some competitive builds from my side, and after that we do a summary. Thank you for watching, and yeah, let's continue. So welcome brothers to the competitive build section, and let's start with a build against some heavy stuff. Of course this is also an experiment, you can say, so I never played actually with this build, so we have also new units in here. So let's directly start. I have a front line or a wide mix of Skaven slave spears. I nearly used them in every of my Skaven builds because they are very, very cheap, they are very efficient, and you for that price, and you can mass them, and this is a good thing to naturally increase the amount of units in your army. So you will see this in many of my builds over here. So I brought many of these guys, 2, 4, 6, 8 groups. Directly behind that I have the more heavy stuff. I brought Plague Monks, Censer Bearers. If you're going to face up against the High Elves, against Chaos, against Dawi, against all that stuff, you need AP damage units, you need elite units, and for this reason I brought the Censer Bearers. I also brought the Blightscap's Plague Pack. As I explained in my faction guide, these guys are really worth the money. Then I brought an Assassin, of course, against Dawi or something like this. You can leave this out over here. This is just in case, if you, it's just worth it, I would say, if you're going to face up against a lot of single entities, monsters, lords, heroes, and all that stuff. And for this reason, an assassin is always good. Even if he is no anti-large, has no anti-large bonus, he performs also really well. For example, against a giant or stuff like that. So against single entities, assassin is really good. But as I said, against Darby or stuff, you can leave this out. Just maybe against chaos or something like that, he's maybe he can doing quite well. But it depends. I brought him with one ability over here, Rival High Talisman, minus 44 melee attack in a range of 40 meters. Then let's go in the last row. There we have the Nettis Bubos Sharpshooters. This regiment of renowned version of the Warblock Chisels. These guys have, you can see that over here, these guys have an incredible wide missile range. Even give me a complete break. Look at that. This is very good. You can see the area in which these guys are able to shoot. So this is very, very good over here. I placed them directly in front of a Plague Car Catapult. Plague Car Catapults are always good, as I explained, against very elite infantry units and stuff, because of the leadership drop, because of the massive AP damage. This thing always pays off in many cases against a lot of high tier infantry units for the price of 900 credits. It depends, of course, on the terrain. Then I brought for my magic the Gracia with the Law of Plague. This is my lord over here on the Screaming Bell. The Slave Spears are protecting my side. 2 groups. And last but not least, the Teeth Breakers. These guys, especially, you can see on the spot now over here, this is a very, very good spot for these guys. They have also a quite good shooting range. It's not the best, but it could be worse. So this is definitely okay, and the damage output is gigantic, as I explained in my guide. If you want 2 groups, take the normal, the rattling guns. If you want take just one, take always the Teeth Breakers. But additional group of rattling guns would be too expensive, so I brought just one. And if we take a short look on the spells, I enable in the most cases the same spells over here. I brought the dreaded 13th spell to cast Storm Vermin, then Vermintide and Plague. Besides from that, nothing special. As I said, this is experimental. I never played with this build over here, but at least you need Censer Bearers. You always, in my opinion, have to use the strength of the mass of the Skaven. So to mass Skaven slaves or something in your build is always good, even if of course Skaven slave spears will do nearly nothing against heavy infantry, but at least you have a good amount of units over here. Besides from that, I think I talked about everything. Let's continue. So welcome to the next build. This is also a build against some heavy stuff. I changed some parts. You can also play, of course, with some red ogres. It depends very strong against the high elves. I would never pick them, for example, because against Phoenix Guard or stuff like that, these guys are completely screwed. So it depends very, very strong. But of course you can put also red ogres in your heavy build to support your weak Skaven slaves and cause some trouble to enemy high or enemy elite infantry. And Skaven slaves are in the front line. So Skaven slaves, of course, as I explained, don't expect anything over here. But against Swords Masters of Howard or PK guards or whatever, it doesn't really matter if you bring Skaven slaves or clan rats. They will do nothing except for overwhelm your enemy and stay for a bit in the front line. Then still Plague Monk Censer Bearers over here, 3 groups with the Regiment of Renown worth the Blightscapes Plague Pack. Then I brought Poison Wind Globadiers. This is the anti-large version, so if you are going to expect to face up against some large entities, you can bring these guys. As I said, I really like them. The damage output is, in my opinion, against large entities quite good, and this is quite decent, I think. I brought the Teeth Breakers again, one group over here. Damage output is very good. It depends of course on the terrain, as I explained in my faction guide. Performance is not always good. It depends very strong if you are able to get them in game or to get them in combat. Then Skaven Slaves protecting my artillery. In this case I brought more artillery, Warp Lightning Cannon and Plague Guard Catapult over here. The Warp Lightning Cannon are for large entities, and the Plague Guard Catapult again for especially for elite infantry, of course, or infantry overall, but elite infantry is a better target, of course. Then I brought the Gracier with the same amount of spells, and besides from that nothing more. So this is another version, you can say, against some heavy builds, heavy stuff, very elite stuff. Yo, let's come to the next build. The next build is a, I would say, universal average build against many stuff, especially when it comes to fights against other factions that are capable to bring large numbers to the battlefield. I brought, let's start with the build. I brought a front line with a mix of Skaven slave spears and clan rats with shields. As I explained in my faction guide, if you pick clan rats, always the shielded version. These guys are at least doing some damage against other low tier units and stuff, and are really able to compete against some, as I said, other low tier units. And for this reason I think this is quite decent over here. This is my front line. Then directly behind that, damage dealer mid-range infantry unit, the normal plague monks, of course against very heavy builds with a lot of very heavily armored infantry units and stuff. This is not your build. Also, if you're going to face up against a lot of monsters, you're really struggling because you don't have too much anti-large stuff. But against a very heavy infantry build, this should work quite decent. For example, the Plague Monks over here have a real anti-infantry bonus, performing really superior against other mid-range or low-tier infantry units. Then I brought Ikit Claw on his Doomflyer. This is a quite cost-efficient version, and I saved some money. I brought him just with Warp Lightning and Brass Orb, and his ability to get a more armor, 24 plus 24 armor over here constantly. So this is quite decent in my opinion, because you drive around all the time. In the best case, you drive through enemy ranks all the time, and the only thing you probably want to do is cast some Warp Lightnings and this Brass Orb ability. Then on this side, or you probably will send them in one group over here, the Ikit Claw and the Doomflyers. I brought an additional group of Doomflyers. Of course, over here it depends very strong in which matchup you're going to bring these guys over here. But I think in some matchups they really pay off. Then I brought some Death Runners, in this case in a Vanguard deployment, to do some sneak attacks. If the units get engaged over here on the battlefield, these guys can do some sneak attacks and stuff like that. I think you guess what I mean. They causing at least also some good amount of AP damage, and the damage output overall is really strong. They have this really superior ability with their melee attack, Weeping Blade, that will reduce the armor. It's a really cool unit over here. And on this side I brought 3 groups for harass damage, some Gutter Runners with poison. These guys are able to fire whilst moving, so you can cause a lot of trouble on this side over here. You can say that this build is very heavy APM intense, because of course you can see this. Maybe you put them over there, it doesn't really matter. It's just for showcasing this over here. But you can see you have here a lot of APM work. You have to move forward with your army. You have with Ikit Claw and these Doomflyers a lot of APM work, and also with the Death Runners. But if you can combine all that stuff over here, I think this build is a very strong build, and it depends very much of your gameplay and your tactic, and if your enemy is noticing what you're going to do. But when everything runs well, I think this is quite strong, because you have a lot of sneak attacks over here. We have a lot of good amount of damage over here with these Doomflyers, the Death Runners, doing some sneak attacks over here. Also the Gutter Runners with poison doing some harass damage. This is very good, I think. So let's continue with the next build, and let's do a build against some heavy builds with a lot of large stuff. So let's come to the last build. I know there are many builds possible. This is just a small selection, some general builds, you can say. So let's come to the last build. I know there are many possibilities available, so this is just a small selection and some general builds, you can say. This is not specific. It always depends against which player you're going to face up against, which faction. So this is just a general selection, you can say, nothing more. But I think the builds are quite decent. If you do some variation in your own builds, in many cases this can work out in many matchups. So let's take a look over here. This is a build against some heavy stuff, maybe against the Lizardman, but it depends always very strong on the meta game. There are Lizardman builds with a very heavy infantry lineup. In this case you will struggle, I think, a lot. But if you are facing up against a normal Lizardman build, let me say it like this, with a lot of dinosaurs, or a build with many dinosaurs and many large entities, this is, in my opinion, quite decent. You have a front line of Skaven slave spears, and nothing more to talk about. Directly behind that, some support from the Stormworm in the middle, the Regiment of Renown unit, the Council Guard. The Council Guard has this Guardian ability, so you should put your hero and your Lord directly in the area. You can see they will get a buff from the Council Guard over here. I brought Ikit Claw on foot, because he is on foot anti-large, even if the anti-large bonus is quite small. I think this is a quite decent solution. I brought him with Brass Orb and Death Frenzy. The additional ability, the best defense, what I explained in my build before, what will give him 25 more armor, is just possible to select with a Doomflyer. So on foot it's not possible. He has his missile damage, and as I said, the weapons, in addition to his weapons rank, he has a small anti-large bonus over here. Then I brought a assassin. Always good, as I said, against single entity units. Then I brought Plague Monks, because you need something against infantry units also, of course. This is always the problem if you are facing up against factions that are typically bring a lot of large entities. If they then bring a lot of infantry units, this you struggle a lot. So you always have to think, okay, let's also take something for infantry to compete against infantry on the battlefield, and Plague Monks doing quite well against that, of course, against some mid-range and low-tier infantry. Then I have Poison Wind Globadiers. These guys, as I said, especially against large entities. I brought the Nettis Bubus Sharpshooters. These guys have also a superior missile range. You can see that. I mean, give me a complete break. This is really good to shoot on everything. More Skaven slaves. A Warp Lightning Cannon, of course, for large entities, to compete against large entities. This is superior. So I think this is a quite decent build. And yeah, but as I said, it depends very much on the meta game. If the factions that are typically bring a lot of large entities battlefield actually maybe bring more infantry units, you have to do some variation, to some other stuff over here. So it depends very strong. But I think as an anti-large build, this is quite good. So let's do a summary. The Skaven are a very popular faction among the fans of the Total War Warhammer saga. They are also very interesting and a quite unique faction to play with. They have many advantages like the capability to bring massive numbers of units to the battlefield or their extreme range skills. Their war machines are legendary and very fun to play with. But the Skaven have also a lot of weaknesses. Their massive amount of low tier units forcing players to create more and more outgrown tactics and to use every aspect of this faction to compete against their enemies. The gameplay itself is very difficult because of massive waves of routing units. A huge amount of micromanagement is necessary to keep the control of the entire army. That makes the Skaven more suitable for expert or advanced players. In hands of these skilled players, however, the Skaven can show their strength with their huge unit variety on the army roster. Before the Prophet and the Warlock DLC, my rating for the Skaven was more in the lower third of all races as a tier 3 faction. This is because I saw personally many negative matchups for them. They struggle a lot against many other factions. Now, after the latest DLC, everything is quite fresh, so it is difficult for me to give a rating here. They will probably stay as a tier 3 faction, but it is also possible that they will move in the upper ranks to tier 2. But that depends very strong on the actual metagame. So we will see what happens, and yeah, time will tell. So this is the end. Thank you for watching my faction guide. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for your thumb up. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for all the kind comments, and I really love to read them. And nothing more to talk about. The Lizardman faction guide will show up probably the upcoming week. I'm working on it, so I hope you enjoyed this one over here. I hope it was informative for you. Give me your thumb up, share this faction guide over here, and yeah, let's see you on, I will see you on the Lizardman faction guide. Peace out, have a nice evening, goodbye.